My tender one, I owe you an explanation. Not for the pain itself. The pain did not come from me, but for the duration, for the length of the season that made no sense to you, for the silence that felt like abandonment when it was, in truth, the most intense sound of work I have ever done inside a single person. I know what it looked like from your side. It looked like nothing. It looked like prayers dissolving into an empty room. It looked like everyone around you moving forward while you stood still, watching the world rearrange itself for others and wondering what you had done wrong to be left out of the rearranging. You were not left out. You were never left out. What was happening in you required the kind of quiet that could not coexist with visible progress. The way the deepest surgical work requires the patient to be still, not because the surgeon has paused, but because the precision of what is being done demands an absence of movement. The shift you have been waiting for is not coming. It has already begun. It started in the hidden chambers of your heart, in the roots of who you are, far below the level where human eyes can observe and measure and report back with certainty. The transformation you have been longing for, the one you prayed about, and then doubted and then prayed about again, is not waiting for some distant future moment to arrive. It is unfolding right here, in this very breath, in this very heartbeat, in the sacred space between where you have been and where I am leading you. Think about what happens in a forest when the coldest season finally begins to release its grip. You cannot see the change happening. The ground still looks frozen. The trees still look bare. The sky still carries that heavy gray that makes everything feel suspended, held in place by forces too large to argue with. And yet, something is already happening. It is happening in the dark soil, in the invisible architecture of roots that have been slowly, deliberately, quietly preparing for what is coming. The sap that appears to have completely retreated from the branches is not gone. It has only gone deeper, drawn into the core of the tree where the cold cannot reach it, where it waits with a patience that puts human patience to shame, gathering strength, storing life, building the internal reserves that will make the coming explosion of growth possible. The tree in winter looks like a tree that has given up. It has done the opposite. It has gone internal. It has traded the visible for the essential. It has chosen depth over display. And in that choice, it is preparing something more magnificent than anything it could have produced by straining to maintain the appearance of life during a season that required it to rest. That is exactly what is happening in you. The green shoots are preparing to break through. The visible evidence of a deep and thorough renewal is getting ready to make its appearance in your life. And when it does, the people around you will be surprised. They will say, "What happened to you? Something has changed. You seem different." And you will smile, because you will know that the change did not begin when they noticed it. The change began in the hidden season, in the long winter of waiting and trusting and clinging to my promises even when you could not feel them working. The change began when you chose, in your tiredness and your uncertainty and your honest questions, to stay, to not walk away from me, to lean into the silence even when it felt like I had gone quiet. I never went quiet. I was speaking in a language deeper than words, working in a register deeper than what human senses can detect, planting something so permanent in the soil of your soul that no storm will ever be able to uproot it. I want you to let that land in you right now, not as a nice thought you collect and carry around politely, nodding at its surface while the deeper places of your heart remain untouched. I want you to feel the weight of it, the reality of it, the way a piece of news lands when it is genuinely good and genuinely true, and not too good to be true at all. A deep renewal has begun in you, not on the surface, not just in your habits or your mood or the circumstances surrounding your life, though all of those things will be touched by what I am doing. The renewal I am speaking about begins at the very core of who you are, at the level of your spirit, at the level of your identity, at the level of the foundational beliefs and convictions that shape everything else about how you live and move and relate to the world around you. This is the kind of renewal that does not wear off. This is the kind of transformation that cannot be undone by a bad day or a hard conversation or a season of unexpected difficulty. Once I have done this work in a person, it holds. it holds, because I am the one doing it. And I do not do anything halfway. There is something I want you to understand about the nature of real renewal, because I think you may have been expecting it to feel different than it actually feels. When people imagine transformation, they often picture it arriving with drama. They expect a clear before and a clear after, a sharp line in the sand, a single dramatic moment where everything is obviously different from how it was. And sometimes, yes, I work that way. I am fully capable of sudden and immediate and undeniable transformation. I have done it. I can do it again. But most of the time, the renewal I bring is more like the turning of seasons than it is like a lightning strike. It is gradual. It is layered. It works through you the way water works through stone, not violently, not all at once, but persistently, faithfully, and with a thoroughness that the violence of a single strike could never achieve. Water over time shapes canyons. A river does not carve its canyon in a day or a year or even a decade. The canyon takes generations of patient, consistent, humble, unhurried work. But when it is finished, what has been accomplished is a landscape of such profound beauty and such physical permanence that it takes the breath away from every person who stands at its rim and looks down into the depth of what the water made. That is what I am making in you. Not a momentary impression, a lasting canyon, a depth that will remain and will be beautiful and will take breath away for as long as your life continues to be lived. So if you have been wondering why the renewal you asked for has not arrived in the form you expected, here is part of the answer. What you asked for is already happening, but it is happening the way seasons change, and seasons do not change in a day. They change through thousands of small adjustments, through incremental shifts in temperature and light and moisture, through processes that are invisible to the casual observer, but are absolutely and reliably moving toward the outcome that was always intended. The winter does not fight the spring. It simply, gradually, yields to it. And that is what is happening inside you. The old patterns, the old ways of thinking, the old reflexes and reactions and habitual fears, they are not disappearing in a single dramatic moment. They are yielding gradually to something warmer and stronger and more life-giving than they have ever been. They are releasing their grip the way ice releases its grip at the first sustained warmth of a new season, not all at once but progressively, corner by corner, edge by edge, thinner and thinner until finally the whole surface gives way, and the water beneath it, which was always liquid at its core, even in the coldest days, flows freely again. I was watching you in the seasons you thought were purely difficult. I want you to hear this clearly. In the moments when you felt most lost, most stuck, most like nothing was happening and nothing would ever happen, I was not absent. My gaze was not elsewhere. There is nowhere else for my gaze to go when you are the one I am tending, because you have my full and complete and undivided attention in every moment of your existence, not as a background activity that competes with the thousands of other things I am supposedly managing, but as the full and personal focus of a love that does not distribute itself or dilute itself or divide itself across its subjects. When I am with you, I am entirely with you. And in every single one of those seasons you experienced as winter, I was entirely with you, working, tending, preparing, nurturing, never stepping back, never losing interest, never running low on the patience and the faithfulness required to do the deep and thorough work of genuine transformation. Think of the patience of a gardener. A skilled gardener does not plant seeds in the morning and return at noon expecting to see results. A skilled gardener understands the timeline of growing things, understands that every variety has its own schedule, its own requirements, its own pace of development that cannot be hurried without causing damage. The gardener prepares the soil carefully, plants with intention, waters consistently, removes what would compete with the growth, protects the tender shoots from the threats that could destroy them before they have established enough strength to defend themselves. And then the gardener waits. Not in the passive sense of doing nothing, but in the active sense of continuing to tend and care and observe and adjust, while the growing happens at the pace that the growing thing requires. I am that gardener. You are what I'm tending. And my patience with your process is as unlimited as my wisdom about what your process requires. I have not once grown frustrated with how long it is taking. I have not once looked at you and decided the work was more trouble than it was worth. I have never considered walking away from the garden of your life and leaving it to whatever grows without care. I am here. I am tending. I am patient. And the harvest, when it comes, will be proportionate to the depth and quality of the care that preceded it. Now think of a seed. Specifically, think about what a seed goes through in the ground before it ever becomes anything visible. It is buried. It is completely surrounded by darkness. It is subject to cold and damp and the kind of pressure that comes from having earth packed around it on all sides. Everything about its situation, looked at from the outside, would suggest that it is finished, that it is buried in the dark, and that darkness is where it will remain. And then something inside it begins to move. The shell that protected the seed in its dormant state has to break apart in order for what is inside to be released. This breaking is not a catastrophe. This breaking is the prerequisite for everything that comes next. Nothing inside the seed can emerge until the outer shell releases its grip, and the outer shell has to surrender before the transformation can begin to be visible. The new life was always inside. The potential was always there, sealed within the shell, waiting for exactly the right conditions to begin the extraordinary process of becoming what it was always designed to become. You have been in that place. You have felt the darkness and the pressure, and the sense of being surrounded on all sides by weight that you did not choose and would not have chosen. You have wondered whether you were buried in a way that precluded any possibility of growth, whether the darkness was permanent, whether the shell of your circumstances had become so dense that nothing living could penetrate it, and something has been cracking open inside you. Some of the shells that have protected you, shells that were necessary for a season but have become too small for who you are becoming, have been releasing their grip. This has been painful at times. It has felt like loss. It has felt like the disintegration of the very structures that made you feel safe. And disintegration is terrifying when you are inside it. But it has not been disintegration. It has been germination. The most important thing that has ever happened in your soul has been happening in the exact moments you felt most like you were falling apart. I was not watching you fall apart. I was watching you break open. And the difference between those two things is everything. The seed that breaks open is on its way to becoming a tree. The tree that stands in full maturity, with its roots going down deeper than anyone walking past it will ever know, with its branches wide enough to offer shelter to others who need a place to rest, with its capacity to outlast storms that would flatten anything shallow-rooted and still stand tall when the storm passes. That tree was once a seed that appeared, for a season, to be doing nothing at all. It was buried. It was broken open. It was completely invisible to any observation. And now look at what it became. Look at the extraordinary fact of what it is now compared to what it looked like in the ground. What grew was always what was inside the seed. The tree did not come from nowhere. It was present all along, encoded in the genetic instructions of that tiny shell, waiting for the conditions that would allow it to express itself in full. You are like that. The fullness of who you are, the complete and flourishing expression of the life I designed you to live, has always been present in you, encoded in your spirit, waiting for exactly the conditions that this process of deep renewal is creating. The tree grows down before it grows up. This is not a metaphor I am stretching to make a point. This is the actual truth of how trees develop, and it is one of the most important truths about your own development. Before the tree can grow tall enough to be seen and celebrated and to serve as shelter for others, its root system must be established at a depth and breadth that is proportionate to the height it intends to reach. A tree with shallow roots can grow quickly in favorable conditions, but the first significant storm reveals the deficiency of the foundation. The wind comes, and the shallow-rooted tree goes over. What looked impressive from the outside had nothing underneath it to make the impression real. Conversely, the tree that invested years in root development before its canopy became remarkable is the tree that can stand in a hurricane and remain. The depth of the roots makes the height of the branches possible in a way that is more than merely symbolic. It is the actual mechanics of how sustainable growth works. Your roots have been going down. The invisible seasons of your life were not wasted seasons. They were root seasons. Seasons when I was developing in you the depth of spiritual foundation that will make the season of visible growth that is coming genuinely sustainable, rather than impressive for a time, and then collapsing under its own weight. The depth of your trust, formed in the seasons when trust was the only thing available because nothing visible was confirming it, is the root that will hold the tree of your new season. The depth of your character, formed in the crucible of difficulty and disappointment, and the 1,000 small choices to keep faith when keeping faith costs something, is the root system from which everything visible in your life will draw its sustenance. You did not waste those years. You were not marking time in those seasons. You were doing the most important work of your life, the underground work, the invisible work, the work that makes everything above the surface real and lasting and genuinely worthy of the growth it supports. That work is now giving way to a new season. The roots are established. The foundation is deep enough. The inner structure has been developed to the point where it can support what I'm about to build above the surface of your life. And the building, when it becomes visible, will be recognized not just by what it is, but by the fact that it holds. By the fact that when the storms come, as they will, you do not go over. You do not go over, not because the storms are not real, but because what is underneath you is more real, more solid, more deeply anchored than any storm that will ever approach. This is what the deep renewal is producing in you. Permanence, sustainability. A life that is not merely impressive for a season, but genuinely and durably transformed in a way that the years will confirm rather than erode. Let the beauty of this settle over you. The spring that is beginning is not the end of difficulty. It is the beginning of a new and stronger capacity to walk through difficulty without being defined by it. It is the beginning of the full life, the life of genuine abundance and joy and purpose and peace, the life that you were always designed to live and that has been waiting, with all the patience of a gardener who knows that the harvest comes to the prepared, for the person you are becoming to arrive at the threshold and step through. You are at that threshold. The winter is yielding. The warmth is coming. The ground of your soul, prepared and enriched by every hard season you lived through without giving up, is ready. And what will grow from this point forward will surprise you with its beauty and its strength and its capacity to bring life and shelter and fruit to everyone whose life it touches. You are not the same person you were. You are becoming who you were always meant to be. And the becoming is magnificent. Let me pull back the curtain a little and show you what I have been doing in the hidden seasons of your life. You have been living inside a story and only seeing the chapter you are currently in, without the benefit of knowing how the earlier chapters were quietly but deliberately preparing the ground for everything that comes next. Understanding what was happening behind the scenes while you were living through what felt, from the inside, like confusion, or delay, or spiritual stagnation, is one of the most liberating gifts I can give you right now. Because when you understand what those seasons were actually for, they stop being evidence against me and become evidence for me. Evidence that I was not absent but deeply, intimately, strategically present in every moment you experienced as hollow or hard. In every season that felt like winter to you, I was actually conducting one of the most sophisticated and comprehensive operations of your life. A winter in the natural world is not a pause in the process of growth. It is a necessary phase of that process, as essential to the final outcome as any of the more visibly productive seasons. The deciduous tree that sheds its leaves and appears to shut down every function does not shut down at all. The activity simply moves from the visible dimension of the tree to the invisible one. The sap descends. The growth retreats from the outer branches to the inner structure. The energy that in other seasons is deployed in the production of leaves and flowers and fruit is redirected, every bit of it, to the deepening and strengthening of the root system, to the reinforcement of the core, to the preparation of the vascular structure that will make next season's outward growth more robust and more capable than anything the previous season produced. The tree is not resting. The tree is preparing. And what it is preparing for is categorically more impressive than anything it could have produced by continuing to strain outward during a season that requires it to go inward. Your winters were not punishments. They were preparation. They were not evidence that I had abandoned you or found you insufficient for the life I had in mind for you. They were evidence of the opposite. that I took your life seriously enough to invest the kind of sustained, underground, invisible care that only produces its visible results over time and through patience. A gardener who does not invest in the preparation of soil, in the enrichment and development of the underground conditions where roots will grow, will never produce a truly flourishing garden. They may produce something that looks promising on the surface for a short time, but without depth of preparation, without the slow work of developing the conditions that genuinely support life, the surface growth is fragile and temporary. I was not interested in surface growth in you. I was interested in the kind of depth that makes surface growth genuinely sustainable and genuinely abundant. And depth requires the kind of patient, hidden, unglamorous work that the winter seasons of a life provide. Here is something specific I want to tell you about what I was doing in those periods of hidden preparation. In the seasons when you felt most cut off from me, when prayer felt like speaking into a room that was empty, when the words of my promises seemed to describe a reality so far removed from your actual experience that holding on to them required a kind of effort that was exhausting, I was not farther away from you. I was closer. I was working at a level of your being so deep that your conscious mind could not register the activity, the way you cannot feel your own bone marrow producing blood cells, even though that production is happening continuously and is absolutely essential to your survival. The deepest work I do in a person is often imperceptible to that person while it is happening. It only becomes apparent in retrospect, when they look back from a new vantage point and realize that something in them is different from how it was, that a quality of trust is present that was not present before, that a capacity for peace has developed that has no obvious external explanation, that they are responding to difficulty in ways that surprise them, because the responses come from a depth of inner resource they did not consciously cultivate. That is the fruit of the hidden work. That is what those seasons were producing. In those periods of apparently fruitless waiting, I was working specifically on the way you hear my voice. Not on whether you could hear me at all, but on the quality of the listening, on the depth of the attunement, on the ability to distinguish my voice from the many other voices that compete for your attention and your trust. This is one of the most important skills a person can develop in their relationship with me, and it cannot be developed in a classroom or through reading alone, however valuable those things are. It develops through long periods of sustained attention to the inner life, through the willingness to be still when activity would feel more productive, through learning to wait in the quiet without filling the quiet with noise, through the gradual, patient development of an inner ear that can discern the difference between the whisper of my spirit and the many other sounds that fill the interior landscape of a human life. Your inner ear has been calibrated through those quiet seasons. Your sensitivity to the movement of my presence has been refined through the very experiences that felt least like growth. The people who hear me most clearly, who move through their lives with the greatest ease and directness of spiritual navigation, are almost always the people who went through the longest and most rigorous seasons of learning to be quiet and patient and attentive. You are among them. Beyond the calibration of your inner ear, there is something else I was doing that deserves your full attention, because it is at the heart of everything I am speaking about when I speak about deep renewal. In the seasons that felt most difficult, I was specifically addressing the deep patterns of thought that have been shaping your experience of life in ways you were not always aware of. Every person carries inside them a set of foundational beliefs about who they are, what they deserve, what is possible for them, how the world works, and crucially, how I work. Many of those beliefs were formed long ago, in early experiences that left impressions before there was wisdom or capacity to evaluate those impressions against a standard of truth. A child who experiences consistent criticism develops beliefs about their own worth that are not based on their actual worth, but on the experiences that shaped their understanding of it. A person who experiences abandonment at a formative moment develops beliefs about the reliability of relationship that are not based on the possibility of genuine faithfulness, but on the specific pain of a specific betrayal. These foundational beliefs, formed in darkness and pain, become the lens through which all subsequent experience is filtered. They are not loudly held or consciously chosen. They simply operate below the level of deliberate thought, shaping the interpretation of experience in ways that confirm and reinforce themselves. I have been identifying those beliefs in you. I have been bringing them gently to the surface, one by one, not to expose you or cause you unnecessary pain, but to heal them, to examine them in the light of what is actually true, to replace them slowly and thoroughly with the truth about who you are as I see you, with the reality of your life as I understand it, which is infinitely more generous and more beautiful than the understanding your old patterns of thought have been producing. This is not a quick process. You cannot simply decide to believe differently and find that the old beliefs have vanished. The beliefs that are most deeply embedded require something more than intellectual replacement. They require the kind of sustained encounter with truth, over time, through relationship and experience, and the patient work of my spirit, that gradually erodes the old foundations and builds new ones in their place. This is what has been happening in you. The foundations of your self-understanding are being rebuilt. The old framework, built on early pain and misunderstanding, is being gently but thoroughly dismantled. And what is being put in its place is something that will hold you in every season of your life and in every circumstance you will ever face. The renewal of the mind is at the center of the transformation I am working in you, and it deserves this much emphasis because everything else in your life flows downstream from it. The life a person lives is the outward expression of the inner world they carry. If the inner world is full of false frameworks, anxious patterns, limiting beliefs about what is possible, defensive reflexes that protect against connection and risk, the outward life will reflect all of those things, no matter how much effort is applied to changing specific behaviors or outcomes. Behavior modification without the renewal of the mind beneath it is exhausting and temporary. The person strains to maintain the changed behavior against the unrenewed mind, and eventually the strain wins, and they are back where they started, sometimes more discouraged than before because the failure confirms the worst things the old mind believed about them. But when the mind is genuinely renewed at the foundational level, when the framework through which a person perceives and interprets reality is itself transformed, the changes in behavior and feeling and relationship and circumstance follow with a naturalness and a sustainability that no amount of effort could have produced. The fruit is the overflow of the root. Change the root, and the fruit changes. Every encounter you have had with my truth, every moment of genuine prayer where you actually came to me rather than just speaking words in my direction, every time you made the costly choice to bring your thoughts back to what is true, instead of allowing them to spiral into what is fearful or false, every wrestling match in the night when you struggled with your doubts and chose in the end to hold on rather than let go, every conversation with someone who spoke truth into your life at exactly the moment you needed it most, all of it has been part of this process of mind renewal. It has not been linear. You have backslid. You have had days, many of them, when the old framework reasserted itself with tremendous force, and you felt like you had made no progress at all. Like the same thoughts were circling, the same fears rising, the same self-limiting narratives playing with a volume and a confidence that made it seem like nothing had changed. I want you to know that those days, as frustrating as they were not setbacks in the way they felt like setbacks. They were part of the process. They were the testing of what was being built. The moments when the new framework was under pressure and had to demonstrate its own coherence and strength. And you came through them. You came through them. And in coming through them, what was being built was proven and strengthened. The days when you chose truth over fear, even imperfectly, even shakily, even through gritted teeth, were the days when the new foundation was being poured. Think about what it takes to work hardened soil. Soil that has been compacted over time, that has lost the aeration and structure that healthy soil requires, that has become dense and inhospitable to the very roots that need to grow through it, does not become workable through a single session of effort. Breaking up compacted soil is slow work. It requires sustained attention, the right tools applied with patient persistence, and a willingness to go deeper than the surface again and again until the hardness gives way. The gardener who works compacted soil correctly creates something extraordinary. Soil that is rich and aerated and capable of supporting life at a level that the surface of the hardened earth gave no indication of. The nutrients were always there. The capacity for flourishing was always present in the soil. What was missing was the preparation that would make it accessible. That is what the hard seasons of your inner life have been accomplishing. The soil of your soul has been worked. The compaction of old pain and old fear and old unforgiveness and old unprocessed grief has been slowly, painstakingly, lovingly broken up. And what is being revealed beneath it is extraordinarily fertile ground for the life that I am about to plant there. Your capacity for joy has been one of the things most affected by this work. Joy, genuine joy as I designed it, is not a feeling that depends on circumstances being favorable. It is a quality of inner life that flows from a specific kind of rootedness, from a specific quality of trust, from the settled knowledge of being loved and held and directed by a power that is greater than everything that could threaten you. This kind of joy cannot be manufactured. It cannot be summoned by will or maintained by discipline. It grows organically and necessarily from the conditions of a renewed inner life. And as the renewal progresses in you, as the roots go deeper, and the soil becomes richer, and the foundation becomes more solid, the joy that grows from those conditions becomes more accessible, more persistent, more readily available to you even in the moments when circumstances would seem to argue against it. You have had glimpses of this joy, moments that seem to come from nowhere, disproportionate to the circumstances that surrounded them, a quiet warmth that settled in your chest during what should have been an unremarkable moment, a sense of everything being fundamentally okay, even when nothing particular had changed, a flash of genuine delight at something simple and small that broke through the gray of a difficult period with a brightness you had not expected and were almost afraid to receive in case it was not real. Those glimpses were real. They were more real than the circumstances that did not explain them. They were evidence of what is growing in the deep places of your life, evidence of the renewal that is happening below the level of your conscious awareness, evidence that the soil of your soul is becoming the kind of soil that produces joy the way a well-tended garden produces fruit, as the natural and inevitable result of healthy conditions and sustained care. The peace that I am giving you is growing in the same way. Peace, in my design, is not the absence of difficulty. If it were, no human being could have it, because difficulty is a constant companion in any life that is actually being lived. Peace, as I mean it when I promise it, is a quality of inner stability that holds its ground in the presence of difficulty, that does not require the removal of the challenge in order to maintain the equilibrium. This peace passes all understanding because it operates according to a logic that the world does not recognize. The world's logic says that peace requires the right circumstances. My logic says that peace flows from the right foundation, and the right foundation is independent of circumstances. What I am building in you through this process of deep renewal is exactly that foundation, the kind of bedrock certainty about who I am and who you are in relation to me that makes peace not an aspiration, but a reality, not something you hope to feel eventually, but something that is increasingly available to you as a present experience, in the middle of whatever you are navigating, because it comes from a source that your circumstances cannot reach. There is a strategic dimension to all of this that I want to make explicit, because understanding the strategy will help you cooperate with it rather than inadvertently working against it. My approach to renewing a person is comprehensive. It does not address one area while leaving others untouched. It begins at the center, at the level of identity and spirit and foundational belief, and works its way outward from there, touching every dimension of the person's experience as the renewal progresses. This means that what you might experience as the renewal of your thought patterns is not separate from the renewal of your relationships, which is not separate from the renewal of your sense of purpose, which is not separate from the renewal of your capacity for joy and peace. All of these are aspects of a single, comprehensive transformation that I am orchestrating with the full attention of my love and the full wisdom of my understanding of who you are and what you need and where you are going. The strategy is not arbitrary. It is not a generic plan applied to everyone who comes to me, as if I worked off a template that standardized the experience of transformation across all human beings without regard for individual difference. You are not a type. You are not a category. You are a specific, irreplaceable, utterly particular person, unlike anyone who has ever lived, or will ever live, with a unique history and a unique combination of gifts and wounds and experiences and capacities and callings. My strategy for your renewal is as specific as you are. Every element of what I have been doing, every season and every test and every grace and every difficulty and every encounter and every moment of stillness and every revelation has been specifically calibrated for you, for the particular terrain of your inner life, for the specific challenges that your particular story has created, for the unique calling that only you can fulfill. I know you well enough to know what you need, and in what order you need it, and at what pace you can receive it. And I am giving you exactly what you need at exactly the right time, with a precision and a care that only love of my depth and wisdom of my scope can provide. Trust the process, not because I'm asking you to suppress your questions or pretend you have no doubts, not because blind compliance is a virtue I am interested in, but because understanding something of what I have been doing, even this partial glimpse behind the curtain, gives you enough to go on. You have seen enough of the pattern to know that the hidden seasons were not empty. You have felt enough of the renewal to know that it is real. You have glimpsed enough of the future to know that it is worth the patience of the present. Trust the process, because the process is mine, and I am trustworthy, and I have never, not once in the whole of human history, abandoned a work I began with my full love and my full intention in the life of a person who kept turning toward me in the dark. You have kept turning toward me. That matters more than you know. Do you know what it actually means to be a new creation? Not in the abstract theological sense that you may have heard spoken in religious settings and nodded at without fully landing in the depth of what those words actually describe. Not as a phrase repeated so frequently that its edges have been worn smooth by overuse, and it slides across the mind without catching on anything real. I want to ask you a genuinely pointed question. Have you let this truth about yourself settle all the way down to the floor of who you are? Have you allowed it to reach the places where you still carry the old self-definition, the old verdict you rendered on yourself based on your failures and your fears, and the things that were done to you, and the things you did that you wish you had not done? Because there is an enormous difference between holding a truth in your mind as a concept you intellectually affirm and actually inhabiting that truth as the living reality of your daily existence. And the distance between those two things is one of the primary distances I am crossing in you through this process of deep renewal. You are not a slightly improved version of the person you were before you came to me. Let that be clear in every cell of your body. You are not the same person with some modifications applied to the most obvious problem areas. A new creation is not a renovation. It is not the preservation of the old structure with cosmetic changes to make it more presentable. When I say new creation, I mean something genuinely and radically new has come into being where the old thing was. The distinction matters enormously, because if you think of yourself as an improved version of your old self, you will keep trying to manage and modify the old self, to discipline it and constrain it and perform improvement upon it. But if you understand yourself as a new creation, you can relate to the old patterns that still surface in your behavior and your thinking with an entirely different orientation. They are not the truth about you. They are residue. They are the old programming running in a system that has received new firmware. The old patterns surface from time to time not because they define you, but because the process of complete transformation takes time to propagate through every dimension of a person's experience. And in the meantime, old habits of thought and feeling and response continue to run from their established neural pathways. But they are not the signal. They are the noise. And the more deeply you inhabit the truth of the new creation, the less authority the noise has over your experience. Think about what happens when a caterpillar enters its chrysalis. For a person who did not know what a chrysalis was, who had never observed the metamorphosis process, looking at that suspended, apparently motionless structure hanging from a branch would not suggest that anything significant was occurring. It looks like stasis. It looks like nothing is happening. What is actually happening inside is one of the most radical and complete transformations in the natural world. The caterpillar does not simply rearrange its existing parts, it dissolves. The biological structures that made up the caterpillar are broken down into what scientists call imaginal discs, clusters of cells that carry the genetic blueprint of what the creature was always meant to become. And from those discs, the completely new organism assembles itself. When the chrysalis opens, what emerges is not a better caterpillar. It is a butterfly, categorically different in its capacities and its movement and its relationship to the very world it inhabits. The butterfly does not crawl, it flies. The butterfly does not eat leaves, it drinks nectar. The butterfly does not hide from the open sky, it inhabits it. Everything about the mode of being has changed, not because new parts were added to the old creature, but because the old creature underwent a fundamental, complete, and irreversible transformation into what it always had the potential to become. That is what a new creation is. And that is what you are in the process of becoming. The dissolution that happened in the seasons that felt most frightening, the sense of losing things you had built your life around, the sense of structures you relied on coming apart, the disorientation of finding that you could not simply go back to who you were before certain experiences changed you permanently, those were not signs of destruction, they were signs of metamorphosis. The imaginal discs of who you are, the deepest and most essential blueprints of your identity as I designed it, were not destroyed in those processes. They were freed. They were given room to begin assembling the person you were always meant to be, the person who was always there beneath the accumulated layers of damage and performance and self-protection and fear. The new creation is not foreign to you. It is the most genuinely you thing about you, finally being allowed to emerge and breathe and move in the freedom for which you were designed. Old things have passed away. Sit with each word of that. Old things. Not all things. The things that are genuinely of you, the gifts I built into you before your birth, the essence of who you are at the level of spirit, those do not pass away. What passes away are the things that accrued to you without my design, the shame that attached itself in moments of failure, the false beliefs about your worth that were installed in you by people who did not know your true value, the fears that took up residence in the places where trust was violated, the bitterness that grew up around old wounds as a protective response, the habits of self-diminishment that became so automatic, you stopped noticing them as patterns and simply assumed they described reality. Those are the old things. They have passed away. They are passing away even now, in real time, as this renewal progresses. Not all at once, not in a single dramatic moment of release. They are passing away the way the autumn passes, gradually but inexorably, with each old leaf releasing its grip on the branch until eventually the branch is bare and clean and ready for the new life that spring will bring. The shame, in particular, I want to address directly, because shame has been one of your most persistent and most damaging companions, and it is the thing that most effectively prevents a person from inhabiting the new creation they actually are. Shame tells you that you are what you have done. It takes the worst things in your history and wraps them around your identity like a second skin, so that when you look at yourself, you see your failures before you see yourself. See your worst moments before you see the whole of who you are. See the judgment you rendered on yourself in those moments of painful clarity, rather than the truth I speak about you in every moment of every day. Shame is a distortion. It is not a description of reality. And one of the most important dimensions of the deep renewal I am working in you is the systematic dismantling of the shame that has been limiting your experience of yourself and your experience of me. You cannot receive love fully while you are armored in shame. The armor deflects the love before it can reach the places that most need it. You may receive love at a surface level, experience it as pleasant, hold it gratefully for a moment before the shame reminds you that you do not actually deserve it, and the armor goes back up and the love bounces off. This is one of the saddest cycles I observe in human experience, because the love is genuinely being offered, fully and freely, and the very people who most need it are the ones most effectively insulated against receiving it by the shame that distorts their self-perception. The renewal I am working in you is, among other things, a renewal of your capacity to receive love. It is the slow, patient removal of the armor, layer by layer, in the safe and consistent warmth of my presence. so that eventually you are standing without the armor and discovering, to your wonder and relief, that you are not destroyed by the exposure. You are held. You are seen completely, in all your complexity and your contradiction and your history, and you are loved just as completely, without condition, without qualification, without the requirement to have been different than you were, or to become something other than what you are becoming in your honest, imperfect, genuine way. The old ways of thinking are yielding. Let me be specific about what I mean, because the renewal of the mind is concrete, not abstract, and naming the specific patterns that are being addressed helps you recognize and cooperate with the work that is happening. The pattern of anticipatory anxiety, the habit of mentally rehearsing the worst possible outcome of every uncertain situation and then relating to that imagined disaster as if it were already real, that pattern is one of the primary things I am working on. This pattern has been an enormous drain on your energy and peace, causing you to live through difficult things not once, when they actually happen, if they happen at all, but many times in imagination, before they ever materialize. The energy spent in anxious rehearsal of disasters that mostly do not come is energy that is not available for the actual living of your actual life. And the renewal I am working in your mind includes the development of a new reflex in place of the anxious one, a reflex that meets uncertainty not with catastrophic projection but with trust, with the settled knowledge that whatever is coming is already held by me, already known to me, already surrounded by my provision and my presence and my power to work it for your good. The pattern of self-doubt is also being addressed. The voice inside you that immediately qualifies every good thing you attempt, that inserts its commentary of inadequacy into every new endeavor, that works over time to convince you that you are not capable enough, or worthy enough, or prepared enough to do what you feel called to do. That voice has been extraordinarily loud for a very long time. It has its source in specific experiences and specific messages you received at times when you were unable to critically evaluate them. It was installed by pain, not by truth, and I am uninstalling it. Not by shouting it down, which never works, but by doing the deeper work of healing the specific wounds from which it grew, restoring to those wounded places the truth about who you are that the wounds displaced, so that the voice of self-doubt loses the emotional charge that gave it its authority. As the wounds heal, the voice quiets. Not all at once, but progressively, as the soil of your inner life is renewed and the conditions that sustain the old patterns cease to be present, the old patterns lose their grip. The pattern of relational guardedness, the protective distance you maintain from people who want to get close, the tendency to shut down or push back when intimacy deepens past a certain point, the way you manage connection to prevent the vulnerability that leads to being genuinely hurt. That pattern is also changing. Every person who learned that closeness leads to pain has a rational basis for the guardedness that grew from that learning. The guardedness made sense at the time it was formed. It was a reasonable response to an unreasonable experience. But over time it becomes a prison rather than a protection, because it successfully prevents the pain of betrayal while simultaneously preventing the joy of genuine connection. And genuine connection is one of the things you were most deeply designed to experience and to give. The healing of the relational wounds that produce the guardedness is opening you slowly and safely to the possibility of genuine intimacy, of letting people in past the checkpoint, of experiencing the extraordinary gift of being fully known and fully chosen that is only available to the person who is willing to be seen, your spirit. This is the part of you that I want to address with particular tenderness right now, the deepest, most essential, most irresistibly you part of your being. Your spirit is the part of you that communes with me, that recognizes my presence even when your mind is full of doubt, that knows things that your intellect has not yet processed, that responds to truth with a resonance that is different in kind from the response of thought or emotion. Your spirit is the part of you that has been most directly touched and most thoroughly renewed through this process, even when the renewal has been invisible to your conscious experience. Your spirit has been drinking from my presence in the quiet spaces of your life, in the wordless prayer, in the moments of unexpected peace, in the reading of my word that touched something deeper than the words themselves conveyed, in the experiences of beauty and wonder that suddenly opened a door in you and let in a light that had no external explanation. When you seek me in prayer, the activity that happens in your spirit during those encounters is more significant than what you are usually aware of. You tend to evaluate prayer by what you feel during it, by whether something noticeable occurred, by whether you received a specific answer or an identifiable sense of direction. Prayer done in faith is always productive, regardless of what you feel during it, because in genuine encounter with my presence, your spirit receives what it needs in a way that does not always register immediately on the surface of conscious experience. The renewal happens, the nourishment is received, the truth is absorbed, and the evidence of it accumulates over time in the slow but unmistakable changes in who you are and how you live. Every time you came to me in prayer, even the times that felt empty and fruitless, your spirit was renewed. The water was reaching the roots even when the surface seemed dry. Your body is part of this renewal as well. The body is not a separate compartment from the rest of who you are. It is the physical expression of your whole person, the place where your spirit and soul live their earthly life, the instrument through which you engage with the physical world. As such, it is deeply affected by everything that happens in the inner dimensions of your experience. The chronic tension that has lived in your body as the physical expression of long-held anxiety will ease as the anxiety itself is addressed at its root. The weariness that has accumulated in your physical frame from carrying burdens that were never designed to be carried by a single human being will lift as those burdens are genuinely released into my hands, rather than being held with a death grip disguised as self-sufficiency. The disruption of sleep that comes from a mind that will not quiet, that continues to process and worry and replay and anticipate even when the body is desperate for rest, will resolve as the mind is renewed, and the capacity for genuine peace in the night hours is restored. I designed your body to be a place of strength and health, and the kind of physical well-being that supports the life you are called to live. The renewal I am working is not only spiritual and mental and emotional. It is holistic, because you are a holistic being, and I do not work in compartments. The restoration that is coming to you will be felt in your body as well as your soul, in your energy and your capacity and your physical experience of being alive in the world. Not as a magic erasure of every physical challenge, because the body is mortal and its mortality is real, and I do not pretend otherwise, but as a genuine improvement in the quality of your physical experience that flows from the healing and renewal of the whole person you are. When the inside changes, the outside follows. When the roots are healthy, the whole tree flourishes. This is the scope of what I am doing in you. This is the comprehensiveness of the renewal that has begun and will not stop. You are being made new. Not improved, not upgraded. New. In the most complete and meaningful sense of that word. And the newness that is coming is not less than what you were, but infinitely more. It is the fullness of what you always had the capacity to be, finally being given the conditions and the freedom and the love to fully emerge. Now let me speak about the things that were meant to break you. The experiences that arrived uninvited and left damage in their wake. The seasons when the ground shifted beneath you and you scrambled to find something solid to stand on, and found that the things you had been standing on were less stable than you had assumed. The losses that took something from you that you could not recover through effort or prayer or the passage of time alone. The betrayals that made trust feel like a luxury you could no longer afford. The failures, your own failures, the ones where you knew what you should have done and did otherwise, the ones where you let yourself and others down in ways that left marks on your conscience that were slow to fade. I want to speak about all of this directly and specifically, and with the full weight of what I am about to say behind every word of it. What was meant to destroy you is becoming the material of your testimony. Not in the future, as a possibility that might materialize if everything goes well from this point on. As a present and already unfolding reality. The transformation of what was destructive into something productive is one of my most characteristic ways of working, and I have been doing it in your life more comprehensively and more skillfully than you have been able to see from inside the process. Let me show you some of what I have been doing with the hard things. The losses you experienced were not punishments. Loss is one of the most painful features of a mortal life, and I do not diminish the reality of what you lost or the genuine grief that loss produces. Grief is real, and grief deserves to be honored. But the story of your losses does not end with the loss itself. Every genuine loss creates a space that the previous fullness was filling. And a space, though it feels like emptiness and the emptiness is genuinely painful, is also the condition of possibility. Nothing new can occupy the space while the old thing still fills it. The loss, as awful as it was, made room. And what I am putting in that room is not a replacement for what was lost in the sense of being the same thing restored. It is something different, something that could not have entered your life without the clearing that the loss provided. This does not make the loss okay in a superficial sense. The pain of it was real and remains real in the memory of it. But it means the loss has meaning that exceeds its own pain, which is different from suffering pain that has no meaning at all. Consider what happened in your faith during the hardest seasons. Faith that has never been tested is, in a very important sense, not yet real faith. It is belief held in favorable conditions, which is a very different thing from belief that has been maintained in the full knowledge of its cost, in the full experience of the silence and the waiting and the apparent absence of evidence, and has chosen to hold on anyway. The faith that survives a genuine test is categorically different from untested belief. It has been refined. It has been proven. It knows something about itself that it could not have known before the testing, namely that it is real, that it holds under pressure, that it is not merely a fair weather conviction that disappears when the weather changes. The faith you have now, the faith that has lived through the seasons you lived through and is still here, is stronger and more certain and more genuinely trustworthy than any faith you have ever had, because it has been in the fire and it did not dissolve. It is not the same faith it was before the fire. It is refined faith. And refined faith is more useful and more beautiful and more genuinely capable of sustaining a life than the raw material from which it was made. The hardest things you walked through have made you capable of compassion at a depth that cannot be manufactured any other way. Compassion, real compassion, is not pity. Pity looks down at someone in pain from a position of comparative safety and offers sympathy from that distance. Compassion, by contrast, comes alongside. It enters the pain rather than observing it from outside. It recognizes the specific texture of someone suffering because it has inhabited a similar texture and knows it from the inside. The compassion you carry now, the ability to sit with someone in their worst hour without needing to fix it or explain it or minimize it, the ability to be a genuine and non-anxious presence in the middle of pain because pain is not a foreign country to you. That capacity comes directly from your experience of pain. It was forged in exactly the seasons you would have most preferred to avoid. And it is one of the most precious and consequential gifts you carry, because the world is full of people in their worst hours who desperately need someone with the courage and the depth to come alongside without flinching. You are one of the people equipped for that, precisely because of what you endured. The wisdom that has developed in you through difficulty is another form of the same alchemy. Wisdom is not information. Wisdom is the capacity to apply truth rightly to the complexity of real situations. And it develops only through the experience of navigating real complexity with real consequences. You have done that. You have made decisions with imperfect information and lived with the outcomes. You have found your way through situations that had no clear path marked through them. You have learned, through direct experience rather than theoretical study, how to hold uncertainty without being destroyed by it, how to make peace with not knowing, how to move forward in the absence of certainty, which is actually the condition of almost every significant step in a human life, and which most people find paralyzing until the experience of surviving the paralysis produces a hard-won willingness to move. That willingness, in you, is real. It is tested. And it is now one of the most valuable things you carry. Let me speak now about the betrayals, because they require their own careful attention. The people who were supposed to be trustworthy and proved not to be. The relationships that carried the promise of safety and delivered something very different. The trust that was given freely and was then used in ways that were damaging rather than honoring. These experiences have left specific marks that are different in character from other kinds of pain, because betrayal does not merely hurt. Betrayal teaches lessons about the world and about relationship that are very difficult to unlearn, even when the lessons are more generalizing than the specific experience warrants. The person who is betrayed by one person does not simply grieve the loss of that specific relationship. They begin to revise their understanding of whether relationship is fundamentally safe, whether people can be trusted at all, whether the openness that makes real connection possible is a wisdom or a foolishness. These are enormous questions, and the pain of betrayal has a way of predetermining the answers in ways that are far more sweeping than the evidence requires. The healing of betrayal wounds is among the most careful and most sacred work I do. I do not rush it. I do not treat it casually. I'm aware of how significant the damage was and how deep the recalibration it produced has gone. What I am doing in those places is not asking you to pretend the betrayal did not happen, or to quickly move to a position of having forgiven and forgotten and reopened yourself to equivalent risk. The healing I am doing is patient and layered and respectful of the reality of what occurred. What I am restoring, slowly and carefully, is the distinction between the specific person who betrayed you and the broader category of relationship. The fact that this specific person proved untrustworthy does not mean that all people are untrustworthy. The fact that this specific relationship was not safe does not mean that no relationship can be safe. The healing is the restoration of a more calibrated and more accurate understanding of the world of relationship, one that neither naively ignores the real risk of being hurt, nor catastrophically overgeneralizes from the experiences of being hurt to a conclusion that closeness is simply not survivable and should never be risked again. Forgiveness is part of this healing, and I want to speak about it honestly rather than in the simplified way it is sometimes presented. Forgiveness is not pretending. It is not the performance of having no more feelings about what happened. It is not the immediate restoration of trust that was broken, as if trust could be rebuilt by a decision, rather than by the slow and evidence-based process through which it is actually rebuilt. Forgiveness is a decision made at the level of the will, before the emotions have fully caught up, to release the debt, to lay down the account of what is owed, to transfer the question of justice to my hands where it actually belongs. This is not a favor to the person who hurt you. It is an act of liberation for yourself, because the account that is kept open and maintained with the energy of sustained resentment is a chain. It keeps you in relation to the person who hurt you in a way that gives them continued access to your energy and your peace. Releasing the debt is not releasing the relationship if the relationship is not safe. It is releasing the grip that resentment has on the inner life of the one who is holding it. And that release is one of the most genuinely freeing experiences a human being can have. Your chain is being loosened. The bonds that have kept you in relation to old wounds and old betrayals and old stories that do not describe your present reality are being released, not because you are performing a spiritual exercise, but because the genuine healing work that I have been doing in those wounded places is making those bonds lose their tensile strength. Healed wounds do not bind in the same way that open wounds do. The scar that remains is not a chain. It is simply a part of your story, honored and integrated and no longer bleeding. And the freedom that becomes available when the wound is healed and the chain is loose is extraordinary. It is the freedom to move through your relational life without the weight of old pain dictating your present choices. The freedom to love without the constant monitoring of the self-protective guard that old betrayal requires. The freedom to be seen without the terror that being seen creates for someone whose experience of being seen has been followed by being hurt. What the adversary intended when the hardest things arrived in your life was your permanent diminishment. The strategy was clear, and it was ruthless. Use the pain of real loss and real betrayal and real failure to install a framework in your understanding of yourself and the world that would keep you small, afraid, guarded, isolated, self-doubting, and cut off from both the fullness of your own life and the influence you were designed to have in the lives of others. The goal was to take a person designed for spacious, free, fruitful, connected living and compress them into a space small enough to contain and control, to use the very real experiences of pain to justify and sustain a contraction of possibility that was never my design for you, and that your soul has been straining against, because your soul knows, even when your mind has been convinced otherwise, that you were made for something more expansive than that. The strategy has failed. Not because the pain was not real. The pain was real, and it did its damage, and the damage is real too. But the strategy failed because I do not leave the people I love in the aftermath of damage without bringing my redemptive work to bear on everything that was damaged. I make all things work together for good, all things, including the things the adversary brought, including the losses and the betrayals and the failures and the seasons of disorientation. All of it is in my hands, and my hands are larger than any catastrophe and more capable than any damage, and what I do with the hard things is not merely repair them to their prior state. I take them, and I work with them the way the most skilled craftsman works with the most difficult materials, finding in the grain and the tension and the particular character of the material something that a lesser craftsman would never discover, and producing from it something that could not have been made from anything easier or more cooperative. You are that work. Your life, with all its complexity and its pain and its grace and its beauty and its specific and irreplaceable particularities, is the material I am working with. And what I am making is extraordinary. Not despite the hard things. With them. Because of them. Because the deep renewal that is transforming you could not have been accomplished in the absence of the very things that felt most like obstacles to it. The wilderness was not the opposite of the promised land. The wilderness was the path to it. And you are on that path, further along than you know, closer to the emergence than you have dared to believe in the most honest parts of your recent experience. The joy that is coming is unbreakable. That is the specific quality I want you to receive as a promise, not as a possibility, but as a promise. The joy that grows from deep renewal, from the kind of inner transformation I have been describing, does not break under pressure the way ordinary happiness does, because it is not rooted in the pressure-sensitive soil of circumstances. It is rooted in the bedrock of who I am and what I have done and what I have declared over your life, and those things do not shift, they do not erode, they do not revise themselves in the face of difficult news. The foundation is constant, and the joy that is rooted in the foundation participates in that constancy. When the hard things come, as they will, you will find that the joy is still accessible beneath the difficulty, the way the river is still running beneath the ice in winter, not visible perhaps, but present and real and waiting for the conditions that will allow it to flow freely again. The peace that passes understanding is not a future destination. It is a present inheritance. It is yours to receive right now, in the full complexity of your current situation, not after the situation resolves and life becomes more manageable. My peace is not conditional on manageable circumstances. It is offered into whatever circumstances actually exist, and it is capable of holding its own, even in the most difficult of them, because it does not derive from the circumstances, and therefore cannot be undone by them. Receive this peace. Actively, deliberately, with the full weight of your intention. Let go of the grip you have been keeping on the alternatives, the worry and the vigilance, and the anxious rehearsal that have become habitual. Open your hands. Receive what I have been holding out to you this whole time. The peace is real. It is here, and it is yours. There is something particular about the way water works that I want to use to help you understand what deep renewal actually feels like from the inside, because the metaphor carries something true and important that I want you to hold on to through what follows. Water in its journey from the mountain source to the valley does not simply flow in a straight line from beginning to destination. It encounters obstacles. It meets the hard faces of rock formations that redirect it. It spreads into shallower, slower-moving sections when the terrain opens out, and narrows and accelerates when the passage constrains it. It finds its way underground for stretches where the surface route is blocked, traveling in darkness through limestone caverns and beneath impenetrable bedrock, emerging again in unexpected places where the geology permits it. Through all of this, it remains water. Its essential nature does not change. Its direction, toward the lower ground, toward the sea, toward the place it has always been moving, does not change. It simply finds the route that the terrain provides, and when no obvious route exists above the surface, it finds one below. Your renewal has been working like water. It has been finding its way through the terrain of your life, which is not flat or unobstructed, but full of the specific contours and impedances that the particular history of your life has created. In the places where the route was clear and the flow was unimpeded, you experienced visible and noticeable growth. In the places where the route was blocked by something hard, grief or trauma, or deeply entrenched old belief, the renewal went underground. You could not see it working. You could not feel it moving, but it was moving. It always keeps moving because the force that drives it is not merely natural momentum, but my deliberate and persistent intention for your life, and that intention is not deterred by the hardness of the obstacles it encounters. It goes around. It goes through. It goes under. It finds the route that is available and takes it, patiently and persistently, toward the destination that was always the destination. And now, in some places, it is emerging again. The underground journey is giving way to the surface journey. The invisible work is becoming visible. The patience of the long underground passage is being rewarded by the emergence into open space, and the water that comes up from underground carries a particular purity and a particular mineral richness that surface water does not have, because of everything it passed through to get to where it is. Your renewal carries that quality. The depth and the richness that come from the long underground passage will be evident in the quality of what emerges, in the unusual clarity and the unusual vitality and the unusual capacity to bring life to everything it touches. The hidden season produced something more valuable than the visible season could have, and the value is only now beginning to show. I want to speak to you about consistency, because it is one of the aspects of the renewal process that receives less attention than it deserves. The dramatic moments get the stories. The mountaintop experiences, the unmistakable encounters, the clear and sudden breakthroughs. Those are the moments people share and celebrate and hold up as evidence of transformation. And they are real. And they matter. But the bulk of the work of genuine renewal happens not in the dramatic moments, but in the 1,000 ordinary ones. In the daily decision to seek me before the day begins its demands. In the repeated choice to return to what is true when the drift toward what is anxious or false reasserts itself. In the consistent practice of gratitude, even on the days when gratitude feels like an act of disciplined will rather than a natural overflow of feeling. In the patient, unglamorous, unsexy daily maintenance of a life that is oriented toward me and toward the people I have put in my way and toward the purposes I have set out for me. Consistency is how the deep renewal is consolidated. Each day you choose, however imperfectly, to live from the renewed self rather than the old self. The neural pathways of the new patterns are reinforced, and the pathways of the old patterns are allowed to fade. The mind is literally and physically reshaped by what it consistently practices. The spiritual life is literally and spiritually deepened by what it consistently attends to. The renewal that I work in the spirit of a person is a seed that requires the consistent water of daily seeking to grow into the full tree it has the potential to become. The breakthrough moments are the fruit of the consistent watering. They do not come out of nowhere. They come out of the accumulation of faithful, ordinary daily choices to show up and to seek and to tend what I have planted. You have been doing this. Perhaps not perfectly, no one does it perfectly, but faithfully enough, consistently enough, with enough genuine desire and real intention that the seed has been receiving what it needs. And what has been receiving what it needs is growing. You may not be able to see the growth clearly yet, because growth at the deepest level is often invisible to the person experiencing it. In the same way that a child growing up cannot notice their own incremental height changes the way a parent who sees them occasionally can. But the growth is real, and the people who have known you for long enough and have been paying enough attention have been noticing things about you that you have not been noticing in yourself. A quality of settledness that was not there before. A capacity for calm in situations that would have destabilized you in an earlier season. A depth and a warmth in how you relate that speaks of someone who has been through something and come out of it with more rather than less. This is what the deep renewal produces over time. Not the sharp edges of someone who has been hardened by difficulty. The rounder, warmer, more spacious quality of someone who has been enlarged by it. The person who has genuinely been through the fire, and genuinely been held through it, and genuinely come out the other side does not come out smaller and tighter and more defended. They come out larger, more capable of holding complexity, more patient with ambiguity, more comfortable in the presence of mystery, more genuinely compassionate because they know from the inside what it costs to keep going when going is genuinely hard. More genuinely joyful because they know, in their bones, what the absence of joy costs, and therefore receive its return with a gratitude and a depth that those who have never lost it cannot quite access. Let me speak now about prayer, and specifically about what happens in your spirit when you pray in ways that your conscious experience of prayer does not always reflect. Prayer has been, for you, a practice that has felt inconsistent in its texture and its productivity. There have been seasons when prayer felt alive and connected, and genuinely dialogical, when you sensed a two-way movement in it, a responsiveness from my side that confirmed you were not simply speaking into empty air. And there have been other seasons when prayer felt flat and mechanical and one-directional, when the words went up and seemed to hit a ceiling and fall back unchanged, and you came away from the practice uncertain whether it had accomplished anything at all beyond the keeping of a spiritual discipline that you were not sure you believed in that particular day. I want to tell you what was happening in the flat seasons of prayer. When you sat down to pray and nothing happened on the surface, when you used the words and went through the motions and came away without any particular sense of encounter or response, my spirit was still present. My spirit is always present. The presence does not depend on your perception of it, any more than the sun's effect on a plant depends on the plant's awareness of photosynthesis. What my presence did in those flat sessions, the nourishment it provided to your spirit that you could not feel and did not notice, was no less real and no less significant than what happened in the sessions that felt alive and connected. The invisible effect was identical in its substance. It was only the subjective experience that differed. And the subjective experience of prayer, while it is real and while I am fully capable of enriching it with tangible encounter, is not the measure of the actual spiritual work that prayer accomplishes. Every genuine prayer you have ever prayed has been heard, not figuratively heard in the sense of registered and filed, actually heard in the sense that I was fully present and fully attentive and fully responsive in every moment of it. The responses were not always the responses you were asking for, and the timing of the responses was not always the timing you needed. But everything you have brought to me in prayer has been received by me, and everything I have seen as genuinely needed in response to your prayer has been given, though often in forms you did not immediately recognize as the answer you asked for. The renewal you are experiencing right now is, among other things, the accumulated answer to years of prayer. The prayer was heard. The answer was being prepared and administered over time, in the form most suited to what you actually needed, rather than the form you were imagining when you prayed. And the answer is here. The renewal is the answer. Not an answer. The answer. Now let me expand on something I touched earlier and want to develop more fully, because it is one of the most practically significant aspects of the deep renewal for your daily life. The way you relate to yourself in your own private inner world, in the monologue that runs continuously beneath your conscious awareness and shapes every other experience you have, is being transformed by this renewal. Most people relate to themselves primarily through the lens of their worst fears about themselves. The inner voice, for most people, is more critic than encourager, more inclined to highlight deficiency than to acknowledge strength, more readily triggered by failure than by success. This is not how I relate to you. And the renewal of the mind includes the slow but real transformation of how you relate to yourself, toward a closer approximation of how I relate to you. I relate to you with delight. This is not a word I use casually or hyperbolically. Delight is the specific word for what I feel when I think about you, when I observe you, when I watch you navigate your life with all its imperfection and genuine effort and moments of grace and moments of failure. The delight is not contingent on your performance in any given moment. It does not spike when you do well and recede when you fall short. It is a steady, constant, foundational quality of how I regard you, rooted in the simple fact of who you are to me, my child, my creation, the one I specifically and deliberately made, and have never for a single moment stopped loving, with the full and unhesitating weight of everything I am. As this reality takes root in you, as the truth of how I regard you begins to displace the distorted inner narrative you have been running for too long, something shifts in how you carry yourself through the ordinary hours of the day. The chronic low-grade shame that has been running as background noise begins to quiet. The exhausting self-monitoring that has required so much of your energy begins to relax. The posture of apologetic diminishment that has been your default in situations of vulnerability begins to give way to something straighter and more spacious, not arrogance, but dignity. The natural dignity of a person who knows, really knows in the deep down place that they are valued and that their presence in the world is a genuine gift, rather than an imposition they need to constantly justify. This dignity, when it takes root in a person, is one of the most visible and most contagious aspects of deep renewal. Other people feel it before they understand it. They experience the presence of a person who is genuinely at ease in themselves, who is not performing or managing or reaching, who is simply, fully, genuinely present, and it calls something out of them. It creates space for them to be similarly genuine, similarly present, similarly undefended. The person who has found their own dignity in me becomes, without effort and without agenda, a catalyzer of dignity in others. This is part of how the renewal in one person spreads to the people around them, not through teaching or preaching, but through the simple and irresistible influence of a life that is genuinely lived from the inside out. Your family feels the renewal. Even now, even in the early stages, before it is fully visible or fully consolidated, the people who are closest to you are feeling something different in how they experience being with you. The quality of your presence has shifted. The anxiety that was there before, the vigilance and the guardedness and the underlying current of strain that colored every interaction, is quieter. You are more available to them now, more genuinely present rather than physically there but mentally and emotionally absorbed in the management of your own inner turbulence. This gift, the gift of genuine presence, is one of the most significant things you can give to the people who love you, and it is something that the deep renewal is making increasingly possible for you to give. The people in your wider circle of influence will feel it too. The colleagues and the neighbors and the strangers you encounter in the ordinary course of a day. The people whose lives intersect with yours in ways that may seem insignificant, but that carry more weight than any of us fully appreciates. Every genuine human encounter has the potential to leave the other person slightly more or slightly less alive than they were before it. The renewed person, the one who is living from genuine peace and genuine dignity and genuine compassion, leaves people more alive, not through any particular thing they say or do necessarily, but through the quality of their presence, which reaches into the other person and touches the part of them that wants to believe that goodness is real and peace is possible and the world contains more grace than it might currently appear to contain. You are becoming this person, not as an achievement to be proud of, but as a gift to be grateful for, a gift of my grace, working through the patient process of your renewal. And the ripple effects of who you are becoming extend further than you will ever be fully aware of in this life, touching lives that touch other lives that touch other lives, in the way that all genuine human presence does, in ways that do not depend on visibility or recognition or any external measure of impact. The quiet life of a person genuinely renewed is one of the most significant lives available in the economy of my kingdom. You do not need a platform, you need a genuine heart. And that is exactly what I have been forming in you through every season of this long, faithful, extraordinary process. Stand at the edge of what you can see and look out toward what you cannot yet see. This is the position of renewal. This is the stance of a person who has done the underground work and is beginning to emerge into a new season, who can feel the warmth increasing and see the first signs of green at the edges of the landscape and know, without being able to prove it, that the full explosion of spring is coming. You are in that position right now. The visible evidence of your renewal is not yet complete. The full picture is not yet shown. But the signs are there, in the small ways you have changed that you might not have noticed consciously, in the moments of unexpected peace that have arrived when peace would have seemed impossible in an earlier season, in the relationships that are becoming healthier, in the capacity for genuine joy that is returning with more regularity and more depth than before. Trust what you see, not the full picture, which is not yet visible, but the signs. The signs are real. They are not wishful thinking. They are not the projections of a desperate faith manufacturing evidence where none exists. They are the first shoots of the spring, and the first shoots of the spring are always, reliably, the harbinger of the full season that follows. The tree that puts out the first small bud in the cold is not wrong about what is coming. It knows something the human observer does not yet know, something it feels in its sap and its roots and the turning of the light, and the knowing is accurate. You have that knowing too. Something in the deepest part of you recognizes that what is happening is real, that the renewal is genuine, that the season is turning, that the long winter is yielding to something warmer and more full of life than anything you can yet point to as proof. Honor that knowing. It is not naivety. It is the testimony of your own spirit, which has been paying attention to what I have been doing in the places your conscious mind could not reach. Now I want to speak to the specific dimension of your life, where the renewal may feel most incomplete, the place where the old patterns persist with the most stubbornness, where the new life seems slowest to appear, where the winter seems to be holding on the longest. Every person undergoing genuine transformation has a place like this, one area or relationship or habit of heart that seems to be the last holdout of the old season, the place where the spring seems furthest away. For some people, it is the way they speak to themselves in their most private thoughts, where the harshness of the inner critic persists, even when other areas of the inner life have become genuinely kinder and more spacious. For others, it is a specific relationship that has resisted the renewal that other relationships have been experiencing, where old patterns loop back with a particular tenacity. For others, it is a specific fear that has proved most resistant to the movement of trust, an area of life where the anxiety springs back with unusual force, even when the anxiety in other areas has genuinely diminished. Whatever that place is for you, I want to speak to it directly. I have not forgotten it. I am not avoiding it. I am not saving it for last because I am unsure what to do with it or because its complexity exceeds my capacity. It is in my hands as surely and as completely as every other area of your life is in my hands. And the reason it has taken longer is not because it is beyond me, but because deep work requires the right conditions and the right timing. And the conditions and timing for this particular area are becoming ready. What has felt like stubborn resistance in that area is actually evidence of how deeply the old pattern is rooted there. And deep-rootedness requires deep work, work that cannot be rushed without being done badly. The thoroughness I am bringing to this area is proportionate to the depth of the root that needs to be addressed. And when this area of your life opens up, it will open with the particular release of something that has been held under sustained and careful pressure, which is one of the most dramatic and gratifying forms of breakthrough a person can experience. Hold on a little longer in that area, not with gritted teeth and heroic determination. Hold on with the same quality of patient trust that has been serving you well in the other areas of your life, the trust that is not based on seeing, but on knowing, the trust that is not contingent on circumstances, but rooted in the character of the one you are trusting. I am reliable in that stubborn area. I am just as present there, just as attentive, just as committed to the fullest possible renewal, as I am in the areas where the renewal has been more visible and more rapid. The slow areas are not the forgotten areas. They are often the most carefully tended ones, precisely because of how much delicacy and patience their renewal requires. The consistency of renewal. This is a phrase I want you to carry. Not the consistency of your performance, which will always be imperfect, but the consistency of my work in you, which is as unbroken as my love for you. There is not a single moment of your life, not a single hour of your history, not a single chapter, however difficult or however far it seemed from everything holy and good, in which I was not actively and intentionally at work in you for your good. This has been consistent from the moment you were formed. It will be consistent through every moment of your continuing life. The renewal is not a project with a start date and an end date after which my attention moves elsewhere. It is the sustained and permanent orientation of my love toward your wholeness, and it will continue for as long as your life continues, and beyond your life into the fullness of what comes after it. What this means practically is that there is no moment in which you are on your own, navigating the renewal without my presence and my assistance. There is no plateau of spiritual development at which I step back and say, "Well enough, you take it from here." My engagement with your process of becoming does not diminish as you become more mature. If anything, it deepens, because the work of the later stages of renewal, the fine and intricate work of bringing the person to their fullest expression of who they were made to be, requires even more of my attention and care and precision than the earlier stages of simply establishing the foundational health that the later work depends on. I am more engaged with you now, in this season of your life, than I have ever been. Not because I was absent before, but because the work is deepening and the engagement is proportionate to the depth of the work. Let me speak now about receiving. Giving and seeking and striving are postures that most people find easier than receiving. There is something in the human disposition, particularly for people who have learned that needing things is dangerous and that depending on others is a risk not worth taking, that resists the full opening of the hands and the heart that genuine receiving requires. Receiving feels exposed. Receiving acknowledges need. Receiving puts the one who is receiving in a position of being without the thing until it is given. And for someone who has learned that need plus vulnerability equals pain, the position of receiving is the position of maximum danger. And so the hands stay half closed. The heart accepts gifts, but with a simultaneous monitoring for the catch, for the condition that is sure to accompany the generosity, for the moment when what was freely given becomes the basis of an expectation or a manipulation. The posture is technically receiving, but it is not actually open. The renewal of your capacity to receive is one of the most tender and most significant aspects of the transformation I am working in you. Learning to receive from me with genuinely open hands, with the full trust that my gifts do not come with hidden costs, that my love does not have a catch, that what I give without reservation and without the expectation of exchange, is the work of a lifetime for many people. But it is possible. It is more than possible. It is what I most deeply desire for you, because the fullness of the life I have for you is accessible only through the fullness of your capacity to receive it, and a person receiving with half-closed hands can only ever hold half of what is being given. I want you to hold all of it. Practice receiving. Practice in small ways to begin, in the quiet moments of beauty that offer themselves to you without any effort on your part. A slant of light through a window, the warmth of something hot in your hands on a cold afternoon, the sound of rain doing its work on the world, the unexpected kindness of a stranger, the memory of a moment of genuine grace that surfaces for no particular reason. Let these things land fully. Let them be received without deflection or qualification, or the immediate pivot to something more difficult that the unrenewed mind uses to protect itself from the exposure of genuine receptiveness. Let them be gifts, simple and unearned and freely given, and let the receiving of them be the practice of an open hand that is building toward the capacity for even greater receiving as the renewal deepens. Because what I am offering you is not small. The life I have designed for you is not a modest and carefully budgeted version of flourishing. The future I have prepared for you is abundant, in the specific and comprehensive sense that abundance means not just material sufficiency, but the full satisfaction of the deep hungers of the human soul, for genuine connection, for meaningful work, for a sense of being exactly where you are supposed to be, for the particular joy of living your actual life rather than someone else's idea of what a life should look like. The fullness of all of this is available. The receiving of all of this is the invitation I have been extending through the entirety of the process of your renewal. Every step of the renewal has been, at its core, an expansion of your capacity to receive the abundance that was always intended for you, but that required this much inner preparation before it could be fully held. You can hold it now. Not perfectly, but genuinely. The hands are more open than they were. The heart is more spacious than it was. The capacity to receive without immediately armoring against the vulnerability of having received is deeper than it was. And the fullness that is available to be received is as full as it has always been, waiting with infinite patience for the hands that are ready to hold it. Reach for it. Not in desperation, not in the anxious grasping of someone who is afraid the good thing will be taken away before they can secure it, but in the quiet and confident extension of someone who knows that what they are reaching for is genuinely there and genuinely for them, and will not disappear the moment it is touched. Reach with the assurance of a child who knows the parent's arms are real and solid and entirely willing to hold all the weight that the child brings. Reach with the certainty of someone who has, through the long process of honest seeking, arrived at a place of genuine trust. Reach with your whole heart, without holding back the part that has been most afraid and most hurt and most reluctant to be exposed to the possibility of hope. That part is safe now. That part can be included in the reaching. I have prepared a place for that part too. The renewal is for all of you, not the presentable parts, not the parts that have successfully managed their transformation into acceptable shapes. All of you, including the parts that are still rough and unfinished and tender and uncertain. Every dimension of who you are is included in this renewal. Every room in the house of your inner life, every area of your experience, every relationship and every pattern and every hope and every wound. I work comprehensively. I am not interested in polishing the visible surfaces while the foundations remain unaddressed. I am not interested in producing a person who looks renewed from the outside, while the inside continues to carry the weight of the unexamined and unhealed. I am interested in the real thing, the whole thing, the deep thing. And the deep thing is what I am doing, with you, right now, in this very conversation, in the quiet of wherever you are as you receive these words. You are not alone in this. You have never been alone in this. Even in the seasons when alone was precisely what you felt. The aloneness was the feeling. My presence was the fact. And facts outlast feelings, always. And the fact of my presence with you, in you, working through you and for you, is as permanent and as real as anything in the universe. And more so, because I am before and beyond everything in the universe, and everything in it exists within my awareness and within my care. How extraordinary it is to be the specific and particular and irreplaceable person that you are. How extraordinary that of all the lives that have been lived and all the lives that will be lived, this specific life, with this specific history and these specific gifts and these specific challenges and this specific potential for contribution, was given to you. How extraordinary that you have been brought through the hidden seasons to this threshold of spring, carrying everything the winter developed in you, standing at the edge of the fullest expression of everything your life was designed to be. Step through. The renewal is real. The spring is genuine. The life on the other side of this threshold is the life you were always made for. And I am with you every single step of the way. There is a conversation I want to have with you about identity, about who you actually are, at the level that precedes every role you play and every description that has ever been applied to you. Because the deep renewal I am working in you is not ultimately about improving your circumstances or even transforming your inner emotional landscape, though both of those things are happening. It is most fundamentally about restoring you to the fullness of the identity I gave you at the moment of your creation, the identity that has been partially obscured or distorted by everything you have lived through, but that was never actually lost. Because what I place in the deepest part of a person cannot be removed by circumstance or choice, or the acts of others, or the passage of time. You are mine. This is the most foundational thing that is true about you. Not mine in the sense of a possession that is claimed and controlled, but mine in the sense of a beloved in whom I have invested everything, for whom I have given everything, whom I have chosen with the full and conscious weight of my love, rather than by default or necessity. Before you chose me, I chose you. Before you turned toward me, I had already turned toward you. Before you had done anything that might give any rational basis for being chosen, I chose. The choosing was not based on merit. It was not a response to anything you had or have or will have done. It was the originary act of my love, the love that loves because it loves, and not because it has been given good reason to do so, by the behavior of the beloved. The identity that flows from being mine is not a thin or theoretical identity. It is the most solid and the most permanent identity available to a human being. Every other identity you carry, every role and every label and every self-description and every reputation you have accumulated through the experiences of your life is subject to change. The roles you play can end. The labels applied to you by others can change as the others change, or as your relationship with them changes. The reputation you have built can be damaged and can be restored and can shift in ways that have nothing to do with who you actually are. The self-descriptions you carry can be revised as your understanding of yourself deepens, and the distortions in your self-perception are gradually corrected by my truth. But the identity of being mine does not shift, does not erode, does not depend on anything external to itself to remain stable. It is given, and given freely, and given permanently, and given with such completeness that nothing in heaven or on earth or in the space between them has the authority to revoke it. You are deeply loved. This is the second thing I want to establish with absolute clarity, not as a religious statement that you affirm and file away, but as a living reality that I am asking you to let reshape everything about how you experience your existence. The love I have for you is not an abstract divine benevolence distributed equally and therefore somewhat thinly across all of creation. It is specific. It is personal. It is directed at you, the particular you, in all your specificity and complexity and imperfection and gift. The love knows your worst days and your worst thoughts and your most embarrassing failures and the things you have not told anyone and the things you have tried to forget. And the love is unchanged by any of it. Not because the love is blind or unintelligent or unaware of the reality of what it is loving, but because the love is of a character and a depth that does not operate according to the logic of merit and demerit that governs so much of human regard. When I look at you, I do not see primarily your failures. I see the person I made, carrying the weight of their human experience, navigating the complexity of a mortal life with the level of understanding and maturity they currently have, which is always, for every human being, less than perfect and more than nothing. I see someone in process, someone who is genuinely trying to find their way, someone who has in them the potential for extraordinary goodness and genuine contribution and deep love and remarkable courage, potential that is in many cases still more latent than manifest, but that is no less real and no less precious for being latent. I see what you are becoming more clearly than what you have been, because what you are becoming is the destination I have been tending you toward, and I have never, not for a single moment, lost sight of that destination, even when you could not see it at all. You are worthy. This is the third truth of your identity, that the deep renewal is restoring in its fullest sense. Worthy not because of what you have achieved, or because of the quality of your spiritual practice, or because you have been a good enough person by any externally measurable standard. Worthy because I have declared you so. Worthy because the love that gives worth gave it to you without condition. Worthy in the same way that a child is worthy of care and tenderness and protection, not because of anything they have earned, but because they exist, and because they are loved. You exist. You are loved. You are worthy. These three facts are as permanent as the love from which they flow, and no failure and no season of difficulty and no voice, internal or external, that has told you otherwise has the power to make them untrue. The person who genuinely inhabits these three truths, mine, loved, worthy, moves through the world differently, not better than others in the comparative sense, simply more fully themselves, more fully alive to the reality of who they are and what they carry, more capable of the genuine giving of themselves that only becomes possible when the self that is being given is secure enough in its own foundation to give without fear of being depleted, to love without fear of being diminished, to contribute without the constant anxious monitoring of whether the contribution is adequate. This is the person the renewal is creating. This is the person you are becoming. And this person is not who you will be eventually, in some theoretical future when all the work is complete, and every wound is healed, and every old pattern is fully transformed. This person is who you are now, imperfectly and partially, but genuinely and really. And the renewal is simply the progressive deepening of what is already true. The relationship between renewal and time is something I want to address directly, because there is a way of thinking about transformation that places it entirely in the future, as something that will have happened when certain conditions are met, when certain work is complete, when the person has arrived at some designated level of spiritual maturity at which they will be able to fully inhabit the new creation they are becoming. This is not how I think about it, and I do not want you to think about it this way either, because it creates a perpetual gap between who you are now and who you need to be. A gap that fills itself with inadequacy and striving and the exhausting performance of spiritual growth rather than the genuine experience of it. The renewal is now, not coming, now. You are already a new creation. You are already worthy. You are already loved. The ongoing process of transformation does not make you more genuinely a new creation than you currently are. You are not becoming a new creation over time in the sense of not being one yet. You are a new creation who is coming into fuller and fuller conscious possession of the reality of what you already are, increasingly able to think and feel and act from the truth of your identity, rather than from the old distortions that still surface with diminishing frequency and authority as the renewal progresses. This distinction matters enormously for how you live in the present, because a person who understands that what they are waiting for is already theirs relates to the present in an entirely different way than a person who understands what they are waiting for as still in the future. The first person receives the present, the second person endures it. Receive the present. Receive this day. Receive this moment. Receive yourself, the whole of yourself, exactly as you are in this moment of your journey, with the progress you have made, and the work still ongoing, and the areas of continuing growth, and the imperfections still being addressed, and the beauty that is already fully present, and the depth that has already been developed, and the love that has already been received, and the calling that is already beginning to be inhabited. Receive all of it, without the qualification that reduces your present self to an inadequate rehearsal for the future self who will finally be worth something. You are worth something now. The present version of you is not an inferior version of the future version of you. It is you, on the journey that is your specific and unrepeatable life, at exactly the stage of the journey that this moment contains. And this stage is worthy of being fully inhabited and fully embraced and fully received. The arms of eternity are holding you right now, not in a future state, in this breath, in this heartbeat, in this specific and particular and unrepeatable moment of your specific and particular and unrepeatable existence. The eternal love that has been the context and the content of your life from before your beginning is fully present right now, surrounding every dimension of your experience with a care and an intentionality that does not diminish, that does not thin out, that does not have to be stretched across the scope of your life in a way that leaves any part of it thinner than other parts. The love is complete in every moment. It is not divided or distributed. It is fully present in this moment, as surely as it will be fully present in every future moment of your life and beyond your life. Rest in this, not as a passive disengagement from your life and your responsibilities, but as the kind of rest that comes from setting down a weight you should not have been carrying in the first place, the weight of carrying yourself, of maintaining your own renewal, of sustaining your own worth through your own effort. Let me carry that. I am designed for it. I am not burdened by the weight of you. I am delighted by it. The carrying of your life in my love is not a duty I perform out of obligation. It is the joy of the one who made you and loves you and will not put you down. Let me carry it. And in the carrying, experience the extraordinary lightness of a life lived from genuine trust, from the settled knowledge that the one who holds you is capable and faithful and full of good intention toward you in every moment without exception and without end. This is the renewal. This is what it comes to at its deepest and most essential level. Not a program, not a process that you manage. a relationship. An ongoing, living, breathing, daily, intimate relationship with the one who made you, who has been pursuing your wholeness since before you were born, who has never given up on you, who sees you clearly and completely, and loves what he sees without qualification and without condition and without the exhausting contingency that characterizes so much of human love. This relationship is the source and the substance and the destination of the deep renewal. It begins here, and it deepens here, and it produces its fruit here, in the intimacy of genuine encounter between the made and the maker, between the loved and the lover, between the child who has finally, fully, decided to receive what was always being offered. Begin again here, or continue here if you have been here before, or deepen here if you are already in the current. Every day is an opportunity to receive this reality more fully than you received it the day before, to let it shape more of your experience, to live for more of the truth of who you are, and who I am, and what exists between us. Every day is a day in which the renewal continues, in which the spring advances, in which the roots go deeper and the shoots grow taller, and the life that was always intended becomes more and more the life that is actually lived. The days ahead are full of the fruit of what has been planted, full of the visible emergence of what has been developing in the hidden places, full of relationships that will be touched and strengthened and renewed by your presence, by the life that flows through you as you continue to receive from me, full of the work that is yours to do and that no one else can do in quite the way you will do it, full of the ordinary moments that, to a person living from genuine renewal, are not ordinary at all but extraordinary, saturated with meaning and presence and the quiet miracle of a life fully inhabited. The days ahead are full, and you are ready for them, and I am in every one of them, already, waiting for you to step into them and discover that the fullness was always real, and always there, and always, always yours. There are mornings that will arrive in the new season of your life that will feel different from any mornings you have known before. Not because the external circumstances will necessarily be more favorable, though they may be, but because the person who wakes into those mornings will be different, more settled, more present, more genuinely available to the life in front of them rather than preoccupied with the management of the interior conflicts that have claimed so much of your attention for so long. In those mornings, you will notice the light in a different way. You will find that gratitude arrives before the anxiety, that the sense of being held precedes the sense of being overwhelmed, that the orientation of the heart toward what is good and true and possible comes more naturally than the orientation toward what is threatening or deficient or uncertain. These mornings are not a reward for spiritual performance. They are the natural consequence of a root system that has gone deep enough to provide stable nourishment regardless of the weather above the surface. They are the morning of a person who has genuinely been renewed, genuinely been rooted, genuinely been prepared for the extraordinary privilege of being fully alive in the one life that is entirely and specifically and irreplaceably theirs. And in those mornings, and in the afternoons that follow them, and in the evenings when the day is gathered back into the larger rhythm of your unfolding story, I will be there, not as a doctrine or a comfort you summon when things are hard, as the one who is simply, constantly, joyfully present with you in everything, in the small moments and the large ones, in the triumphant chapters and the ones that require more courage than triumph, in the seasons of visible fruit and the ones that require the patience of the underground, in every breath of the life that is being renewed and deepened and expanded and filled with the love that was always its source and will always be its home. The specific areas where the deep renewal is doing its most visible work right now deserve to be named and celebrated, because celebration is part of how renewal is consolidated. When a person notices what is genuinely changing and takes the time to receive it with gratitude and recognition, the change deepens. It is not merely acknowledged on the surface and then forgotten. It is received into the core of the person's understanding of themselves, and it becomes part of the new foundation from which future growth proceeds. So let me name some of what is changing in you, and let me invite you to receive it with the full depth of the gratitude it deserves. The way you speak to yourself. It is quieter, the harsh voice. It is not gone, perhaps, but it has less authority than it had. There are moments now when you catch it beginning its familiar criticism, and something in you, something that was not available before, simply declines to agree. Not with great drama or spiritual effort, simply quietly, from the place of a person who has heard something truer than the criticism and cannot fully forget it, even when the criticism is loud. That quieting of the harsh inner voice is one of the most significant indicators of genuine renewal, because the inner voice shapes everything, and its transformation, however gradual and however partial at this stage, is evidence that the foundational work is taking effect at exactly the level where it matters most: the way you receive help. There was a time when receiving help of any kind felt like a concession, like an admission of the inadequacy you were already afraid was too visible, like an exposure that left you open to the judgment you anticipated from anyone who saw your need. That particular armor is becoming lighter. The acceptance of help, the allowance of care, the willingness to be in the position of receiving rather than always giving, is becoming more natural. This is a gift. Not everyone who goes through difficulty comes out of it with a greater capacity to receive. Some come out more self-sufficient and more defended than before, having concluded from the experience of need going unmet that the only safe strategy is to never need anything from anyone. You are not going in that direction. You are going in the opposite direction, toward the spacious and generous vulnerability of a person who has been met in their need enough times to believe that being met is genuinely possible and genuinely safe. The way you experience ordinary beauty, the small graces of a day, the things that were always there but that anxiety or pain or the heaviness of unresolved inner conflict rendered invisible, are coming back into focus. A color in the light that catches your attention and holds it for a moment in pure appreciation. A sound that is simply itself, simply pleasant, simply received without the anxious overlay that used to convert almost every sensory experience into an opportunity for further rumination. A conversation that left you feeling genuinely seen, genuinely connected, genuinely glad to be the person who had it with this particular other person in this particular moment. These small registrations of beauty and connection and gladness are the incremental evidence of a life that is becoming more inhabitable. Honor them. They are not small. They are the texture of the full life asserting itself in the fabric of your ordinary days. The way you face uncertainty. This may be the change that most directly reflects the depth of what has been renewed in you, because your relationship to uncertainty has historically been one of the most distress-producing features of your inner life. Uncertainty activated the anxiety, triggered the catastrophic projection, set in motion the elaborate mental effort to control and predict and prepare for every possible negative outcome that might emerge from what was unknown. That response is still there in some form, because the nervous system that learned it deeply and does not simply unlearn it overnight, but it is less automatic. There is more of a gap now between the arrival of the uncertainty and the activation of the anxious response, and in that gap, there is something new. A pause in which something deeper than the anxiety is briefly audible. A quiet that was not there before, in which the possibility of trust genuinely registers as an alternative to fear. That gap is the most important space in your inner life right now. It is the space in which the renewal is most actively expanding its territory. Lean into it. Let it grow. What lives in that space will define the quality of your life more than almost anything else. This is where you are. This is who you are becoming. And this is where I have been. In every chapter, in every season, in every hidden underground passage, and every moment of visible growth, and every ordinary day that was, in truth, a day of extraordinary and ongoing transformation in the hands of the one who loves you most and knows you best, and will not stop until the work he began in you is complete, and the fullness of the spring that he has been preparing from the very beginning of your story has arrived in all its extraordinary, permanent, and entirely personal abundance. The renewal is for you, specifically for you, begun for you, sustained for you, and arriving now, in this exact moment of your reading or listening, as a word directly and personally and entirely from me to you. Receive it. Let it be yours. The spring is here. And if you cannot feel the spring yet, if the winter still feels more present than the warmth that is coming, hear this. The spring does not announce itself by how the person in it feels. It announces itself by what is happening beneath the surface of what can be felt. The roots that have been going down are real. The seed that has been cracking open in the dark is real. The renewal that has been underway in the hidden places of your soul is real. Your feeling of the spring will catch up with the reality of it. It always does. The tree does not feel the sap rising before it rises. But the sap rises, and the feeling follows, and the leaves come, and the fruit comes, and the full testimony of the winter's underground work becomes undeniable to every eye that had the patience to wait for it. You have had that patience, and now the testimony is forming. Be patient a little longer, and then simply watch what I do. There is a future ahead of you that is worth walking toward with your whole heart, not a fragment of it, not the cautious and hedged portion of yourself that you have learned to deploy when hope feels dangerous. The whole thing, the full weight of your desire and your energy and your trust and your willingness to be genuinely and completely surprised by good things. The future I am speaking about is not a vague promise made to encourage you through a hard moment and quietly revised when the hard moment extends into a hard season, and then another hard season, and the promise begins to feel like it was made about someone else's life rather than yours. The future I am speaking about is specific. It has your name written through it the way a river has the shape of its banks, not accidentally, not generically, but in the precise expression of the particular terrain through which it flows. The renewed version of you walks differently through the world, not with arrogance, which is the strut of the person who needs others to confirm their value, with ease, with the particular quality of groundedness that belongs to a person who no longer needs external validation to know that they are real, that they matter, that what they carry has value. The exhausting work of managing the impression you make on others, of monitoring how you are being received, of adjusting your presentation to secure approval or avoid criticism. That work becomes less and less necessary as the renewal deepens, because its necessity was always a function of the unmet inner need for validation. When the inner need is met at the source, the compulsive reaching for external validation loses its urgency, and what becomes available in the space that was occupied by that reaching is a quality of presence and genuine attention that makes you actually more, not less, attractive and impactful in the lives of others. The person who is no longer performing is the person others most want to be around, because they recognize the authenticity, they feel the absence of an agenda, they experience the rare gift of being with someone who sees them rather than needing to be seen by them. Your relationships will flourish in this renewed season in ways that will surprise you. The quality of connection that becomes available to a person who has done the deep inner work, who has healed the wounds that were distorting their capacity to give and receive love, who is no longer relating primarily from the defensive or the needy positions that old wounds impose, is qualitatively different from the quality of connection that was previously available. Relationships entered by a person who is genuinely whole, who is coming to them from abundance rather than deficit, who has learned to love without keeping score, and without the invisible transactions that make love feel like an obligation or a manipulation. Those relationships carry a different energy from the start. They breathe. They have room. They are not strained by the demand that they fill needs they were never designed to fill, or haunted by the fear of what happens when they prove imperfect, because the person bringing themselves to the relationship is not requiring perfection of it. This does not mean the relationships will be without challenge. Relationship between genuinely human people is always going to encounter friction and misunderstanding and the hard work of ongoing repair. But the friction no longer carries the existential weight it carried before, when every disagreement threatened to confirm the deepest fears about whether love was reliable and whether you were genuinely lovable. The renewed self meets the challenges of relationship from a different foundation, with different resources, and with a capacity for repair and return that makes the challenges generative rather than destructive. The purpose you are designed for is becoming clearer. Purpose, as I think of it, is not primarily a job description or a specific set of activities. though it will express itself through activities. It is more fundamentally the sense of being exactly the person you were made to be, doing exactly what only you can do, in the exact places and relationships and spheres of influence that your unique combination of gifts and experiences and passions and callings equips you for. This sense of purpose, when it is genuinely inhabited rather than merely aspired to, produces a quality of daily living that is unlike anything else in human experience. The work becomes the expression of the person, rather than the demand imposed on the person. The contribution becomes the natural overflow of who you are rather than the strained performance of what you think you should be doing. The days feel like they belong to you, like you are living your actual life, rather than a version of life you settled for when the real one seemed unavailable. You are not in the wrong life. You are in the right life at the stage of its unfolding that precedes the fullest expression of what it is meant to be. The preparation was not wasted time. The preparation was the making of the person who will inhabit the purpose, and the making of that person required exactly as long as it took and could not have been compressed without producing someone less than fully prepared for what they will be called to do and to carry. The season of visibility that is coming, the season where what has been growing inside you begins to produce the kind of visible fruit that others can receive and benefit from, requires the depth of root system that only the hidden seasons could produce. You needed all of it, and now you have it. Let me describe the quality of life that is opening in front of you, not as a fantasy but as the simple and real consequence of genuine transformation. A life lived from genuine renewal has a different quality of energy running through it than a life lived from depletion and fear and the constant effort of self-management. Renewal produces vitality, not the forced enthusiasm of someone trying to appear more alive than they feel, but the genuine, restful kind of energy that comes from being aligned with who you actually are and what you're actually designed to do. When a person stops spending the majority of their life energy on the management of their own internal contradictions and the defense of their own fragile self-image, an enormous amount of energy becomes available for actual living, for genuine presence with the people they love, for genuine engagement with the work they are called to, for the kind of play and delight and rest that are the natural oscillation of a life that is genuinely lived rather than perpetually survived. The ordinary days will feel different, not because extraordinary things will be happening in them necessarily, though they may, but because you will be different in them. The same morning, the same cup of something warm, the same view out the same window, experienced by a person who is genuinely at peace in themselves, genuinely rooted in their own identity and in their relationship with me, genuinely free from the weight of accumulated shame and unprocessed grief and exhausting vigilance, becomes a qualitatively different experience than the same moment experienced from the inside of all that weight. The world has not changed. The person experiencing the world has changed, and that change in the experiencer transforms the quality of every experience. This is what I mean when I speak about the full life you always wanted. Not necessarily a life of dramatically different circumstances. Those circumstances will change. A life of dramatically different inner quality, of genuine presence and genuine peace and genuine capacity for joy and genuine freedom from the things that have been limiting you. The full life is available right where you are, with the people you already have around you, in the circumstances you are currently navigating. It becomes available not when the circumstances change, but when you change, and the change is happening. Begin this renewed life right here, in this moment, in my arms. This is not a directive to perform something or produce something or immediately demonstrate your renewal through visible transformation. This is an invitation to simply receive, to be held, to let the love that has been pursuing you through every chapter of your story finally land in the full depth of who you are, rather than bouncing off the surface of your guardedness. The arms of my eternal love are not a metaphor designed to inspire a feeling. They are the actual reality of your existence. You are held by a love that has never for a single moment wavered in its commitment to you, that has been pursuing your wholeness and your flourishing with absolute patience and absolute consistency through every twist and difficulty of your story, that has been present in every moment you experienced as empty and waiting in every moment you experienced as delay, and working in every moment you experienced as loss. This love does not require you to have been different than you were. It does not require you to have made fewer mistakes or to have arrived at this moment of deep renewal without having needed every step of the long path that brought you here. The love is not a reward for having done the inner work admirably. The love preceded the work. The love was the source of the capacity for the work. The love is the environment in which the work happens and without which the work could not happen. You did not earn your way into being loved by me. You were loved before you existed, loved in your forming, loved in every chapter of your life, loved in the worst chapters when you were the farthest from being the person you wanted to be, loved in the hidden seasons of root development, loved in the breaking open, loved in the slow emergence, and loved in the fullness of what you are becoming. The love is constant. It is the one absolutely reliable feature of your existence, more constant than the sun and more permanent than the ground you stand on. Let this love be the foundation, not as a doctrine you hold with intellectual conviction, but as the lived reality that shapes how you move through every day, how you relate to yourself in your own private thoughts, how you receive the inevitable imperfections of your own ongoing renewal, how you offer yourself to the people whose lives intersect with yours. Let it be the bedrock from which everything else in your renewed life is built, because everything that is built on this foundation holds. Everything that is built on this love endures, and everything that your life will produce from this point forward, every fruit of the renewal, every expression of the purpose, every contribution to the world of other people, will have the quality and the permanence that only love of this kind can produce. The renewal is real. It has begun. It will not stop. It will not be revoked. It will not be subject to revision based on your performance in the days ahead, because it does not depend on your performance. It depends on my faithfulness, and my faithfulness is not variable. What I begin in love, I complete in love. What I plant in faith, I tend with care. What I declare over a life, I bring to pass through the patient and comprehensive work of my spirit in the willing and responsive person who keeps turning toward me even in the dark. You kept turning toward me. In the coldest seasons, in the heaviest silences, in the longest waiting, you kept turning. You did not understand why you kept turning sometimes. There were moments when it felt almost irrational, when the evidence seemed to argue against the turning, and the easier thing would have been to simply stop. But you turned anyway, and every single time you turned, I was there. Every single time. Not occasionally. Not when you turned correctly or with enough faith or with the right words. Every time, without exception, without qualification, without limit. I was there when you turned, and I am here now. And the renewal that has been building through every one of those turnings is about to manifest in ways that will show you, beyond any remaining doubt, that the turning was not wasted, and the waiting was not empty, and the faith you maintained at such cost was not misplaced. The spring is here. The winter is over. The ground of your soul is ready, and what will grow from it will be the most beautiful and the most lasting expression of who you were always meant to be. Open your hands. Open your heart. Receive the newness. Receive the fullness. Receive the love that has been holding this future for you with the patience of eternity, waiting for exactly this moment to place it in your hands. You are a new creation. Old things have passed away. Behold, all things are new. Amen. If this message touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear these words today. Type Amen in the comments to receive this blessing. There is someone in your life who is in the middle of the hardest season they have ever faced, who cannot see the renewal that is already beginning beneath the surface of their pain. Your simple act of sharing this with them could be the word that gives them the courage to hold on one more day. And one more day is sometimes all that is needed to reach the breakthrough. Leave a comment below and tell us what part of this message reached you most deeply. Your story matters. The renewal happening in your life is real, and this community is walking through every season of it together. None of us alone.